Invocation, please. Our gracious Heavenly Father, I want to thank you, Lord, for allowing us to gather freely, Lord, once again. Thank you for allowing us to arrive safely here, Lord. Be with us on our way home. Please, Lord, be with this board in this meeting to make the best decisions for the people of Pickens County. Lord, I pray that you would be with all of our elected officials, local, state, and federal, that they would turn to you for guidance, Lord, that they would seek your wisdom and your guidance, Lord, to make the best decisions for the people of America, Lord, so that we may remain living free and prosper, Lord. Be with our first responders, be with our military, be with our healthcare workers, Lord, that have taken care of us to help us recover from these awkward times that we're dealing with now, Lord. Lord, please go with us throughout the rest of this evening and the rest of this week, and all these favors and things we ask in my Son's name. Amen. Amen. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank y'all. Item 2 is reading and approval of last month's meeting minutes. I would assume we've had a chance to look those over.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the minutes be approved as they're written.
I have one question. In the last paragraph, where it says basically that we were supposed to be voting to defeat it, and then it says 0 yes and 5 no's. And I'm just reading that on should it be done?
I believe that should be reversed, shouldn't it?
Okay.
Because the move was to vote to deny versus.
I amend my motion.
I'll second.
We have a move and second. Any other discussions? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Motion carries unanimously. Item 3 is old business. We have none. Item 4 is new business. We have pretty much a full docket tonight. We have 5 different items. The first is, item A is, I'd like to announce that we want to open up a public hearing for this rezone request. RZ-190026. I'd like to ask Justin what the county's recommendation is for this rezone.
Yes, sir. This is a rezoning for a 10.1 acre tract of property off Highway 515 and Bigun Boulevard. The request is for an agricultural piece of property to be rezoned to rural residential. The staff recommendation is that the application for rezoning be denied, but that if it be approved, it should be approved with conditions. Condition 1, access to Highway 515 must be approved through GDOT first. A small subdivision of the maximum amount of lots the 3 concurrent Teal family rezonings would allow. Condition number 2, should the lots of the 3 concurrent rezonings be split further, Bigun Boulevard must be paved to county standard, allowing each lot access off of the paved road. In addition to that, all 3 of the concurrent rezonings also have the option to, if it were to go to a family member, Chapter 67-8.1 has the intra-linear family transfer provision, and they can split off property with family members in that manner as well. So why I gave you the extra for these.
Is, Mr. or Mrs. Teal here?
Yeah.
Anything you'd like to add, please, or comment on?
Well, I just wanted folks to know, or we want folks to know, we're not trying to sell the property. We're not trying to develop the property. Our concern was kind of multi-pronged. To get our mortgage, we had to build on 10 acres to get a mortgage. We've already built our house on it, and we're building and almost finished with Lisa's mom's house, which is on another of the 10 acres. To get the mortgage put together, we had to divide the property in the county ordinances, or kind of a gray area. I'm not exactly sure how it happened, but we had to divide it down with their consent so that not the full 10 acres is on the mortgage. So it's kind of a weird deal in that the county knows that we're not trying to sell it and stuff, and we couldn't sell it because it couldn't be used elsewhere. The other acreage that is not associated with the house that we built. So what we were wanting to do is make it so that we've got a number of kids and grandkids, and all we wanted to do, in case you change your rules in the future about handing it down to family members or whatever, that it wasn't going to be a battle royal between family members. I get this, you get that, and all that kind of thing. When I bought the property, well, I bought the property years ago. Don Kohlberg, that owned the original Carnes Mill store, it eventually burned down and we bought the property, but he told me we'd never have any neighbors because the property, the Walsh estate, had 11 heirs, and that they didn't speak. Half of them wouldn't speak to the other half, so they'd never get together and be able to sell the property. Well, it worked out through Lamar Cantrell, real estate agent that worked the deal for us. He eventually got all 11 heirs to go in and sign the property, and we bought the part of the estate that was on our side of the house. And if any of you know what the terrain looks like there, it's sheer. Very little of that property is buildable. We built both houses that we're building on the creek, and all we want to do is make it so that our children can know for sure they're not going to have to fight about what's left over as we kick the bucket. Sooner or we're not kids. Sooner or later, it's going to be an issue, and we just like to have it so that it's set in stone who gets what. Nobody's going to fight about it, and a lot of you probably know we own the restaurant there. We intend to own it forever, for as long as we can. So I don't want neighbors, to be honest. But if I had to, if times got tough, and we all know things change. If times got tough and we needed to sell to survive, I'd hate to have the restriction of got to have 10 acres or else. So that basically kills the use of that property if we ever needed to, when folks everywhere else is dividing things up however they want to. I would like to have that freedom to make sure that we've got some flexibility as we get older and don't have to worry about it. And there is access off of 515. There's a driveway up that the power company uses to get, there's a power line that crosses the property. And there's access that circles back for the power company to be able to clear under their power line there. And it's available, it's in the deed, it's recorded with the DOT and everything else. So, and that's up on the 10 acres that we haven't done anything with. And don't know that we're going. But like I say, we don't plan to sell, we're not trying to start a subdivision or anything else. It's just we'd like to know in the future if we needed to do something, or as we leave it to the kids, that we're able to do it without the rules changing under them.
Thank you. Any questions from the board or Mr. Teal or the county?
So, Justin, you state that the, not in conformance with the comprehensive plan. And that you speak to the arterial commercial corridor. Speak more to that one.
It is, it's, if you look up here on the comprehensive plan character area where it says vision, that's more of what, when the comprehensive plan was put together, that the input came back for a commercial and industrial style area off of 515. As everybody knows, it's a very busy corridor, especially Thursday to Sunday. And it's more appropriate to have commercial and industrial uses on that area rather than residential. Have your residential a little bit buffered from that busy corridor.
Have you seen the terrain? I mean, we own commercial property there and operate a commercial operation there. But where the property line starts for these three lots.
Sir, Mr. Teal, you'll have a moment. So when the questions, and this goes for all the hearings, will these be directed to the board and not to each party?
Okay.
So that's okay. No, I should have been checked. I apologize. So again, this is, the discussion is not between the parties, it's between the board and whoever's speaking. So,
If you like, sir, I can grab a copy. I didn't bring a copy of the comp plan with me, though.
That's okay.
Okay.
Justin, what is it going to rural residential? Each of these is already 10 plus acres, so if they could have been divided without it being, let's say, agriculture.
That's what the request was rural residential.
Oh, okay. Why rural residential instead of agriculture?
My understanding that we had to have 10 acres to build on. And we had 30 some odd acres total that we added to what we already had. Well, what we already had is commercial. And frankly, well, to answer your question is, we had to divide it into, you can only divide it so often, no matter what. I mean, you can't just do whatever you want. And so we divided, because of the way it's zoned, we had to have 10 acres to build on. Am I wrong in that?
I don't know.
It's my understanding from in personnel's change in the zoning department. But
how many acres is required to build?
Okay, so
In
agricultural.
agriculture.
Agriculture's 10. Would you like me to go down?
Sure.
Agriculture's 10, small ag is 5, estate residential's 3, rural residential's 1.5. There's a couple of those that are smaller than that.
That was those were why go to the 1.5, if you need then you 10 and you wouldn't have to divide it. I wouldn't have to do something.
I think Mr. Teal could probably answer this better, but I believe that they want to divide it further for their children later on, and he's not quite sure, and he can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm not quite sure if that provision is going to remain in the code, so they want the zoning so that they can have 1.5 acre pieces on their family property that they can give to their children.
Yeah, well, the thing, when I bought the original property, my old building up on top of the hill behind the restaurant, there was no zone. But there was obviously a convenience store there, so you can tell commercial is viable. But that property you can see from the highway. And the rest of it you can't. I mean, it's straight off. I'm just telling you, it looks like Six Flags going through the driveway that we go to the house that we built. Not complaining, I love it, but it's just not there's not a lot of spots where you could build on. I'm just being honest. I mean, it doesn't have viability. It would take 1 million loads of dirt to make that flat enough to use. It's 300 feet elevation change on that 10 acres that we have up past the power line on the farthest part of it. I mean, it's just not possible. You couldn't hold it. I I mean, it's just not possible. But if for us to divide it and say, okay, this youngin gets this and this youngin gets that, we just can't do it with 10 acres because we've only got 10 acres that's not spoken. It's not associated with one of the two houses. And the reason for the acre and a half is because of that, because so much of it's not buildable. We can determine with a survey what would be, so we can make sure that every one of the children were able to get something that was usable instead of something that's shared that couldn't be used for anything. And you know how people, I mean, families get that way. We're just trying to find a way to not let that happen. And nobody here has more interest in that property being properly utilized than we do. I mean, it's where we live. We're there 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. And by the way, we live now on, or just have moved from Old Whitestone Road, just across the highway. And we bought 4 acres over there, and that's, I mean, it's right across the road, right across the highway. It's not like, and Miss Sharon, one of the heirs of the Walker Estate, lives directly across on Carnes Mill, across the highway from the restaurant, and she's on 1.5 acres. I mean, it's not like it's going to be an airport or something. It's just not. And we're just trying to find a way to divide it down, and everybody's knows what they're getting, and everybody's happy. That's basically. Yeah, and the only reason 1.5 is because if we're going to come in here anyway, why not make it so that we can make sure that we can divide it up and everybody's got something to use? It's not that that's the purpose. Yeah, 3 wouldn't, we would still have enough if it went down to 3 acres. We'd have enough that all the kids would get something that we haven't already committed a house to.
Any other questions or comments?
Chairman, may I add our standard provision? If we could incorporate the entirety of the office's file and video recording of the planning commission's hearing, including but not limited to all witness testimony, in order that this information be made part of the record and shall be available for the Board of Commissioners to review.
Is your concern here with the access to 515 more geared towards a non-family situation? I absolutely get that.
Yes.
But
Yep.
if you have a property subdivided into various things, it could end up not being a family situation.
Yes.
So Justin, you suggested that if we were to approve, then you want the 3 lots served through a private road that would be constructed to county standards.
If it ended up being, if they were split further, then
How would that be enforced?
So if a minor subdivision came through for any of those parcels, then they would be required. That's what it's for. So like to say, if any of the 3 parcels were to be, say they decided, well, this piece of property, this is just, here's this 10-acre tract, none of the family wanted to live on that. They wanted to live over here because terrain or something like that. Somebody comes along later on down the road, says, I can grade that and make a minor subdivision out of it. Well, if they did that, they would then be responsible because of the extra traffic generated. They would be required to pave that road.
So would that access be through the Bigun parking area there? How would that work?
Well, there's only 2 that I'm aware of. There's a access point off of 515, and then there's Biggins Boulevard. If it's not too many lots, Biggins Boulevard is the most logical choice. Anytime you cut in a road and do subdivision, the lots have to be over 3 acres, or you not have to curb and gutter it. Once you start developing, it starts getting more and more intensive. the requirements. So,
Well, I think that's probably a pretty good suggestion, because I travel that road and people drive like mad, racing up and down there, and too many driveways with too many access creates a very dangerous situation.
but you don't want to pull into your house off of 515 and get rear-ended by somebody trying to go see the leaves change. Or my thoughts.
Any other questions or comments?
This entire tract that we're talking about, these next, this request and A, B, and C are all part of the same parcel, 34.67 acres, basically being split into three. I mean, that's what we're talking about right now.
There are
10 acres, 14.67, 56 acres, and 10 more acres.
Those are already existing lots of record as is.
Okay, now we're doing tracks.
Yes.
So there's
they-
one
they
track.
They want to, so there's a block here,
Right.
there's another block in the middle, there's another one down here, and what they're looking to do is change from all three of these from ag to rural residential.
Got it. But you need further subdivision of that, well, they could split each one of those once a year though, right? In half.
So they could do, if it was rural residential, the minimum size is 1.5 acres. But if they were to split it down,
I misspoke.
okay,
They could come before, they wouldn't have to do anything to break off something one time.
so right now, what they could do is they could break off one piece per child or grandparent or,
It doesn't have to come before this body.
no, it goes through our
Right.
office.
Right.
And they have to be a minimum of 1.5 acres, but they can only do one a year.
Right, right, okay.
Can I ask, because I don't know all the rules, but if we broke off, does that mean that with 3 different lots, that each of those could be, we could carve out 1.5 acres out of each one, each year for a kid?
If,
I just don't know, I'm sorry, I don't know.
yes, according to what, yes.
Maybe we could solve this, being an issue. Is there a way to guarantee that that's grandfathered? That the passing on to family members is grandfathered so that, or that we could do that? Even if you as a body decided that it shouldn't happen in the future, that our property could be?
You can't give a vested property on that, but I don't know that you ever, I mean, it's been that way since y'all adopted zoning. I don't know like.
But now, if it stayed agriculture, they can't subdivide that 1.5 acres, can
They
they?
can to an immediate family member.
To an immediate
He
family.
could sell it to you, but he could give it to his child.
You give to a child or grandchildren or whatever.
And one of the things Justin and I talked about is we'll eventually have something in front of you of addressing what happens if that is foreclosed on. And it goes to a non-family member through that kind of action. We don't have it ready for you yet. But that is an option yet.
It's an option.
I didn't understand. I can't.
Yeah, I know, it's hard.
I don't.
But could you surmise what he said? I mean, could you say again, Philip, please?
Well, I mean, yes, if y'all deny this and it stays agricultural, he could still give 1.5 acres to an immediate family member or more, not less than 1.5 acres.
But see,
One per year.
One per year.
but the problem, like I say, the problem with that, from our perspective, is we have to make that decision right now, who gets what. What if we can just divide it up, and then as we are both gone, then there's, let's just say 12 pieces of property that, and we've got 12 heirs. And it makes it simple and they can do what they want. That's, again, that's why we're here, not so that we can develop it, just so that we can figure out for the future where everything stands.
Any other questions or comments?
So Justin, you're comfortable with the recommendations that you've made. If we were to approve it with these conditions, that the county can continue to meet what's important?
Yes, sir. The only reason I recommended denial is that it's pretty much the exact opposite of what the comprehensive plan denotes for that area, for future land use.
For the record, the next piece of property up is a dump. It's a landfill. And we already have 2 of those lots with a house on it. They're not going to be commercial. I mean, I'm just, like I say, it's not in the cards.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I would move that we approve the request before us to submit to the commissioners, subject to the conditions that have been laid out, the 2 conditions.
And Mr. Chair, is that for A, B, and C, all 3?
That would be my intent.
For all 3 tracks?
Yeah.
And I would second that motion.
We have a move in second to agree to recommend the rezone request be moved to the Board of Commissioners. Any
Subject to the conditions.
subject to the conditions that the county recommends. Is there any?
Mr. Chairman, before you close your hearing, though, were there any parties to speak?
No, there was nobody to speak out against, for or against.
On any of those 3?
Pardon?
On any of those 3?
No, no, just, no, those 3, that's it.
So can we expedite this by submitting that it applies to all 3? Okay. I would submit that it applies to all 3.
Okay. So, again, is there any discussion? We have a move and a second. Is there any discussion?
One question, the conditions are enforceable? As a recommendation? All right.
Any other discussion? All those in favor of the rezone request being approved or recommended to approve for all 3, A, B, and C, please raise your hand. Motion carries unanimously. That takes us to item D. That hearing is closed for A, B, and C. So now, item D, we have a conditional use permit, CU-190029. Again, we'll open up a public hearing for this. Justin, I'll have to ask what the county recommendation is, please.
Yes, sir, this is a piece of property that is zoned rural residential. They're asking for a conditional use for a personal care home. It is a 0.69 acre tract of land. Staff would recommend that the planning commission recommend a denial for this conditional use to the board.
Based on,
there's several items. Would you like me to go down the list? Sir? Okay. So we have different criteria that we have to consider for conditional uses. Access to the site is appropriate considering the anticipated volume of traffic resulting from the use is the first one. Stevens View is a narrow residential street. At 115 Stevens View, it measures approximately 17.5 feet of paved surface. Additional traffic potential of more frequent emergency vehicle use would further limit access to the other properties. The next major one is 5. It's the proposed use will not have a significant adverse effect on the level of property values or the health, safety, and general welfare and character of adjacent land uses or the general area. A negative effect on the neighboring property values, health, safety, and general welfare would not be able to be determined until the property was active. However, change in the character would be a significant increase in traffic as there are currently only approximately 11 properties that have access off of Stevens View Road, and the potential for another 15 persons plus care staff would increase traffic along the road. 6, physical conditions of the site, including size, shape, topography, and drainage, are suitable for the proposed development. We said additional parking will be required. This will be difficult as the lot is existing non-conforming for lot size. Minimum in rural residential is 1.5 acres. And adding additional parking and adequately screening it will present a challenge with setback requirements. Other than that, the only additional comments that staff had was the general incorporation is to incorporate the entirety of the office's file and video recording of the Planning Commission's hearing, including but not limited to all witness testimony, in order that this information be made a part of the record and shall be available for the Board of Commissioners to review. But I can answer any other questions if y'all have them.
Any good questions for Justin?
So, Justin, has the fire marshal examined any of this as proposed?
He has.
And what was his recommendation?
I think he did a preliminary, but I think he approved everything to start with. I think once it goes through our department and a conditional use is granted, potentially by the Board of Commissioners, they can proceed further going along for that thing. But as I'm sure most of you know, this property was used for a similar use a while back, which was discontinued.
So even with the narrow road that's accessed in there, the fire marshal is comfortable?
I believe he looked at the interior. I don't think access and stuff is necessarily something that I think structure is what he looks at.
I would think access is important though. If you can't get to it, you can't fight a fire.
Absolutely. You can get to it, just nobody else can get down the road once the truck's there.
But if you've seen firefighting scenes, you know that it can get chaotic. Access becomes a critical issue. That's my concern is from that perspective. Okay, Mr. Chairman, all my questions.
Any other questions for Justin before we move to Mr. Capo? Mr. Capo?
Thank you, sir. For those of you who don't know me, either by reputation or otherwise, I'm John Capo, representative Claudia Roger, and Ms. Roger, you stand so you put her face with the name. She's standing right there. That's my client. She's filed the request use permit that you have in front of you, and her intention is to provide an in-home care facility that will house up to 50 residents at a time. This facility will be their permanent care facility. Property is currently zoned RR, rural residential. It's a house that has 3,017 heated square feet with a basement that has 1,260 square feet that's 95% finished. Ms. Roger purchased this property from Mr. Hill, who is here as well today, on June 2nd of this year. Prior to the purchase, the property was being utilized by Mr. Hill's niece, Sarah Welch, as an in-home care facility without a special use permit for approximately 10 years. As it had been grandfathered in, and Ms. Welch had up to 6 residents at the time. As I understand, the justice concern is primarily focused on traffic and your concern, sir, about the fire marshal. The fire marshal did come out and he viewed the interior and the exterior and he was comfortable with it. Let's talk about if there was a fire. Well, if there's a fire at any of the residents on the property, on the road, you would still have the same issue with emergency vehicles blocking the road for the residents. So I don't know if that's a real legitimate concern. Anybody has a fire along this road is going to have the same problem with blocking the road for firefighters to come in.
Well, I would suggest that 2 or 3 people in a house versus 15 people who's in some need of care was a little different scenario, but
I understand your suggestion. Let's talk about additional traffic. These are going to be residents who do not have vehicles. Mr. Rogers, her staff consists up to 6 people. There would be 2 people there at a time, 24/7, plus Mr. Rogers, she comes there to maintain and take charge of the facilities. That's 2 cars coming in and out, beginning of the workday, end of the workday, and beginning of the next shift, end of the next shift. So you don't have a concern about additional traffic being generated by the residents. So there's a minimal impact as far as traffic is concerned. You say, what about these people having visitors? Let's talk about the current situation with COVID-19. These in-home care facilities are under the same restrictions as nursing homes are statewide, as far as the residents being sheltered in place, not being allowed to go out, and having visitors not being allowed to come in. We don't know how long it's going to last, but let's talk about down the road when we hope it gets past the pandemic and we get back to a normal situation. Ms. Rogers has a prior history of running this type of facility in Cherokee County. And she would tell you that, unfortunately, her residents have very few, if any, visitors. Families put the residents in there and pretty much don't care about them. They have very few visitors. You may have 1 or 2 on occasions every other week or so. So once again, the traffic impact is going to be very minimal. Ms. Rogers has a prior history. She's experienced, loving, and caring to her residents, and treats them with respect and dignity as if they were her own parents. She's been in this area for work for more than a decade. She worked as a dedicated caregiver for assisted living and memory care communities in Cherokee County since she moved to Georgia from Florida in 2006. She started caring for elderly residents with dementia and Alzheimer's disease as the manager at a special assisted living care facility of 38 residents in Woodstock. While working there, she was told by the administrator that the only time that the administrator would feel comfortable taking any time off or breaks was when Ms. Rogers was present. Her history is impeccable. The quality of care that she renders to her patients is impeccable as well. There is a need for this type of service in Pickens County. She has a doctor and nurse practitioner who are on call 24/7 for medical emergencies. While the special use permit has been pending, she has completely renovated the building with new flooring, carpeting, new paint, adding an additional back door and exit sign, handicap access bathroom, and garage door. Parking as it is has been approved by the fire marshal. There's not going to be any additional work that needs to be done. There's a need for the facility. I believe Justin's concerns are made in good faith. However, I'd ask you to think about what kind of traffic impact there's going to be for 2 or 3 employees coming at the beginning and end of the workday when you have residents who are not driving. So once again, I would reserve the remainder of my time to answer any questions that you might have.
Any questions, Mr. Capo?
To clarify, so there will be 15 residents?
Up to.
Up to 15 residents.
And also to clarify, she has a history. You may be wondering about the state licensing requirements. It's ready to go. All the state needs in order to approve the licensing is for the property to be, this rezone, or this application to be granted, and that process would take about 2 to 3 weeks to get the license issued.
What are you gonna do when that septic tank backs up and you hadn't got half the property that you're supposed to have with the septic tank? What are you gonna do when it stops up? And are you gonna sit with 15 people and no way to?
We would have services. Anybody can do it, we would have somebody.
Other than having a regular service.
Yes,
Inspection, yeah. Every year they have to have an inspection.
I don't know how the house got on a half acre to start with, but it's supposed to be an acre and a half.
Well, the house is there, sir. It was grandfathered in and used for the same thing up to the time, shortly before the time Mr. Rogers bought the property. Any other questions I might be able to address?
It says there are 0 bedrooms in this house, so you got 15 people. Even you don't allow for kitchen and dining and everything else, that's going to be 20 square foot per person. How do you have people up?
The house has been redone and remodeled. There's a kitchen facility, there's 9 bedrooms.
There isn't, there are bedrooms, the paperwork says 0 bedrooms, it's not saying that.
Not, well, and that was in a typo.
If there was no bedrooms, it's a typo.
There's 9 bedrooms and the kitchen.
And that was one
2
of my
kitchens.
concerns, is if there was no bedrooms, I'm like, yeah,
Yeah.
you get a COVID thing with people lined up.
Chairman.
In this space.
May I?
Yeah, go ahead.
Is that on the tax assessment records?
It's on the-
It's on the application.
Application,
I saw that too.
Okay.
I don't know where it's at.
Somewhere in our page.
Okay, I'm just checking. Thank
It's on
you.
this
Oh,
page.
okay.
It's on the tax assessment.
Yeah,
It's
tax
0 bedrooms.
On the tax assessment. Keep over. There's 9 bedrooms, to answer your question, and 2 kitchens.
Yeah, okay, I was thinking, what if you down all in one area, and you got COVID or flu or anything else?
And just one other thing about COVID, it's a concern for all of us. Anybody that is coming in there as a resident will be screened and tested before they're allowed to come in, and the patients are tested on a regular basis to meet all of the state requirements on that particular issue.
Thank you. Thank you. We have several people that would like to speak in regards to this rezone or this conditional use. Excuse me. I would like to remind you or let you know that each side has 10 minutes to present their case. And so that means if you've got 5 people, each can have 2 minutes, or one can have 9 minutes, and others can have a minute, or if y'all want to take a minute and let 1 or 2 people be your spokespeople, or each person can, whatever, I'm just letting you know you got 10 minutes, so it's however each side wants to present.
No, object to just one person.
Yeah, you don't want to do it just one time.
Yeah, object to just one person.
There's 8, just so that you'll know, there's 8 forms, signed up, so.
When do we start now?
I won't take it again.
Go ahead.
My name's Carol Wilson. My husband Thomas and I have owned 8.5 acres there in the corner of Bowling Fountain and Stevens View Road. We've lived there for like the past 35 years. I've seen all the changes that have taken place in that little area there. We dealt with some traffic issues when the Goss tractor was down behind on a dead-end road, using our side dead-end road with additional traffic to move their tractors and business and that sort of thing in and out. Luckily, we haven't dealt with that yet because of the additional tractor place that's coming down behind Mr. Bags's property, which also has access on 515. speaking in terms of the things that your gentleman's addressed as the board's concerns, having lived there for 35 years and been there during the time that the other facility was there, I can speak to the accessibility as far as emergency vehicles are concerned. As it happens, my bedroom is on the very front of our house, which faces Stevens View Road. And numerous times during the night, I have heard emergency vehicles trying to back into that property. And because of the way the curve exists there in that property, not just the width of the road and the lack of any kind of, I believe you call it, shoulder, particularly on one side. They have extreme difficulty backing in there. It takes them a long time because you hear their beep, 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 beep. And also the headlights that shine right into my bedroom window. That is one of my primary concerns because I know that those type of residences would need that sort of service periodically. Additionally, I have seen the traffic from the employees. I've been retired now for about the last 3 years and I'm home most every day. And I have seen the increase in traffic that takes place there with employees going in and out. Because otherwise, you very rarely see cars going down that street at all, except for, of course, the people who live there. I have a grandchild now. The 2 dead-end roads that we happen to sit in the corner of are excellent for communities with children and for a community with elderly people who may not need to be involved in a lot of oncoming traffic and that sort of thing, who may want to be able to get out and walk and take a leisurely walk along the roadside in their community. And as homeowners, we have seen the improvements that Mr. and Ms. Fleming have made across the street from us as rural residential a community. I know we have other properties that are probably going to be changing there in the near future, and just so appreciative of the commission for having the foresight to have this process to give those of us who have lived there for so long to place our objections. So thank you for listening.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak?
I'm Chris Baldwin. I live on Bowling Fountain Road, and to go along, the reason I jumped up so quick because it kind of backs up what Carol said. I come in a lot of times in the evening just about the time of school buses and all that's coming. Well, since our school board, and this is nothing against none of y'all or whoever, but anyway, the school bus don't come down in there anymore. There's 4 and 5 cars and 4-wheelers and whoever parked out there at the highway at Refuge to meet kids. And I've had to sit in Refuge Road waiting to turn in and meeting cars head on, kids walking down the road. The parents can't help that. But when and it's also not a matter of just an ambulance that comes most of the time. You've got first responders, you've got a fire engine and all this. And any of us that lives back in there, I'll tell you that road, even if you meet in your personal car, you've got to get in Carol's yard, my yard, Jimmy and Robin's edge of their yard. Actually, he had to put up rocks, I think, when he first bought the place to keep people parking on his property to meet a school bus. It's just absolutely too narrow back in there. And to say these people ain't going to have any visitors, that's crazy. People's going to come. 2 caregivers. You're going to have somebody that's got to clean, somebody's got to cook, somebody's got to do all this stuff. So I really would ask you as the board to please turn it away, whatever the word is. Thank you.
How much time do they have left?
A little under 5 minutes.
Okay, you go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, so my name is Phil Johnson. We purchased 3688 on Refuge Road, and the Stewarts owned it, I think, prior to, like, 3 years. So Ray and Cindy Adams bought it, new model. So when we bought there, Ray was telling me about he had to block off the road. Our property backs up to Stevens View. So they had to block it off with trees and whatever because ambulances would pull down our back of our property, on our property, to access the house. There's only 26 feet, roughly, between my property line and the garage that's on the property. Probably about 50 to 60 feet to their actual home. So we're really close. The borders aren't there, you know, that it really should be. All the drainage from their property, that particular house, does drain onto my property. It's just a natural runoff. I've thought several times about sewage, you know, the issue with sewage back there, because we get a ton of rain. You know, Jimmy's put in a ton of rock to slow that down, but we also have 2 kids, and they play back there a lot. So we can't control the security back there at all, and I don't like them being back there. It's a major security issue for a 14-year-old and a 10-year-old. We usually go back there, but now with all the traffic and people in and out, you know, we're really concerned about that affecting our property. So that's basically the bottom line for us.
This house sits on 6.69 acres facing a double curve in the road. I lived across the road, and it was a nursing home. The employees and visitors parked on the road, at times blocking the road. They had no parking lot. Delivery trucks and service trucks parked in the road. They would turn in my drive. I had to repair my driveway 3 times where they crumbled the edge. I have lived in my home 43 years.
There's still time if anybody else, you know, of the 8 that signed up.
Also, I had a big speech wrote out, but I forget about that. Me and my wife Robin live at 27 Stevens View, which is right next door to 115. We've been there for 9 months. We lived in Paulding County for 33 years. Don't hold it against us. We decided to move up here to retire, to be close to some friends, and now this has happened. It was an empty house that was for sale. When we looked at ours, we had no idea that it had previously been a care facility. We would have never bought our house, never, in a million years. And now here we are, faced with this coming back in, and I'm afraid it's going to hurt our resale. I'm scared to death about it. And of course, all the other stuff that you hear. So that's all I got to say.
Thank you. Got 2 minutes tonight, anyway.
You've got 2 minutes. I'm Alvin Stewart. I'm speaking on behalf of my mother, Margaret, that's lived in visual sight of this property for 54 years. Mr. Hensley mentioned something earlier. I think I have something that they might could verify. The sanitary septic system on this property has been approved for 11 people with no room for expansion. You might want to check that. As far as the traffic, unless something's majorly different, and I can't see it because this sounds to me like pretty much the same type of operation, saying there's be no visitor traffic. I've seen everything from weekend and holiday traffic when I would go visit, all the way to end-of-life situations, which are inevitable in this, and yes, you do have traffic. I've seen as many as 20 cars probably parked there at one time. And again, we've got people that have invested. Mama has put money into her house, and my dad passed away some 18 months or so ago. And it is a property value thing, and I know time's running out. And so I'll sit down with one thing here. With the aging population, we've got the baby boomers. Yes, they are getting older. They do need help. There's no question that we need a facility like this. We just don't need it on a 1.5 lane road in a residential neighborhood.
Amen.
Thank you very much.
Yes, amen. Thank you. Good.
Okay. Is there any questions or comments?
Just how this was allowed to operate with 6 residents just because it came under the beat zoning.
So, my understanding is that it was in operation before zoning was adopted.
Right. That's what I'm-
However, I don't know if there was anything before Sunshine Manor, but Sunshine Manor had a business license from December 8th, 2009 to June 30th of 2017.
And if nothing happened here today, they could continue to operate with 6 or cannot operate at all?
No, it would be a residence.
Any other questions or comments?
I just like to address the last speaker there that said that we are baby boomers and we don't need to be reminded we're getting older.
I'm Gen X. Any other questions or comments?
Just my concerns are ingress and egress for emergencies. I think that's a major issue, and I can't consider approving this request without some acknowledgement that they have actually looked at that particular issue. I'm a volunteer firefighter, and I know what it's like to drive a fire engine and tender in difficult situations. I think we need to know more before we can consider that.
I can tell you that I drove down there in a four-wheel drive pickup truck, and I had to use his driveway to turn around because you can't do it. And access to the site it does come around a curve and go down. So one of my concerns was the parking. We also have 15-foot side and rear setbacks. The size of the lot is 0.69 acres. There's I believe a building in the back, along with a house, and it's on a bit of a grade. It's not really room with those setbacks to accommodate what needs to be there. A turnaround for fire trucks, a turnaround for ambulances. Most of these people, most likely, are going to be a little bit older, maybe not in perfect health. We're probably going to get quite a few ambulances there, and that was considerations that staff took into account when we wrote the report.
Well, and one of our speakers addressed that ambulance issue of ambulances do make a beeping noise when they back up.
They also need to get in there and out of there quick.
Also, I want to note for the record, if there is a tie, if we vote and there is a tie, I'll have to abstain because I'm friends with a lot of people on this side and I've got kindred on this side. So I'm just running the meeting.
If I have any time, I'll kind of address just a couple of quick points, just for informational purposes here.
About the caregivers, state regs require one caregiver for 15 people. So she's going to have 2 caregivers there on a full-time basis. I don't know if you have the aerial map for the project in your packet. But what's going to happen if this application is approved is that a turnaround, and I think this was discussed with the fire marshal, is going to be added in the property for the vehicles, emergency vehicles to come in and use that to get in and out of the property. The other thing is that the comment that one of the people speaking in opposition made about additional traffic, there hasn't been any employees on the property since the property was purchased. So I don't think that that's a legitimate comment. And this is not going to be a commercial operation like this. This is going to be an in-home personal care facility, 2 employees, 3 if Ms. Rogers is there. It's not going to create any additional traffic coming in and out of the workday. Once again, and then the security issues. I would submit to you, we all understand, or at least I don't feel about it, but an attractive nuisance, something out there that attracts children, can be a dangerous situation. This is an empty house sitting there right now. There's nothing more attractive to children than an empty house to create a dangerous situation. If you have a piece of property that's occupied and is being used, the issue concerning children trying to get into the house and getting into a dangerous situation, that's not going to arise. So traffic's not going to be increased, Turnarounds will be added for emergency vehicles for discussions with the fire marshal. We don't mind if that's a condition to get approval on this thing. And the requirements, this is up to 15 people that she wants to have. If you want to reduce the number in the recommendation in order to meet the septic requirements, you will certainly be amenable to that. If there are no other questions, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Capo. Any other discussion or questions?
I don't see how the septic system take care of 15 people. That's my problem. If they don't have the room to put the field on them, and they have to get on somebody else's and they expand it. And if it tears up, it could take 2 or 3 days to get it fixed, and what 3 or 4 people are gonna do for 3 days?
Can I say something? When I bought that property, we had another septic tank put in, we got 2 of them in there. I went to the planning commission and asked them about putting a 3rd one in, putting it up to the road, put a pump, put it up, or to pump it up to it, and have the front yard for the drain lines. They said no, because the front yard would have to do that if the ones there messed up now. But they haven't messed up in 8 years. I don't know how big they are, but we had to have another big one put in. And we got the drain lines all to it, and they've been working good for 8 years. You know, get them pumped out every so often. We haven't had any problem.
Any questions or comments?
I just do not think in a neighborhood like this, this is a business in the end, that it should be there. It's on a dead-end road. There is no space for the kind of parking. I've had a number of relatives in rental homes, and I go speak several times a week, so people do visit. I would make a motion that it be denied.
We have a motion to deny, well, the motion from the county is to deny, so you're making a motion to accept the county's recommendation to deny the conditional use. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a move and a second to accept the county's recommendation to deny the rezone request. Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Motion carries unanimously. I want to remind everybody that the planning commission is just a recommending body. The final say for anything discussed here tonight, the Teals, for you, Ms. Roger, is decided by the board of commissioners at I guess the next meeting. Is that correct? It'll be at their next meeting?
It won't be this week. The board of commissioners meets Thursday, this one.
Okay, so it'll be the October meeting, the board of commissioners meeting in October. So they have the final say. We're just a recommending body. So that hearing is closed. That takes us to the final item on our agenda, item E. Now, so we have opened up a public hearing for item E, RZ-190030. I'd like to ask Jasper what the county's recommendation is.
Mr. Chairman, would it be okay if we leave?
You're fine.
Yeah,
Yeah, love to put it out there.
I'll help you, Bob. Good way to get worn out with a stick.
You taught me not to. You did.
That really is.
Good to see you.
That's what there might be.
Chairman, this is a application by Brian Smith for a rezoning for a 29.125 acre tract of property. It's located off the Jerusalem Church Road and Mooreskin Road. And it is, the request is for the property to go from agricultural to rural residential. And the intent is to allow Mr. Smith to develop a minor subdivision of 7 lots. Staff recommends that the application for rezoning be approved, but also a possible condition, if the planning commission so chooses, would be to limit the minimum lot size to the survey as presented. They're a little bit larger than the standard lot size for rural residential.
About, what's the?
I think they're 2.5. I think there's a 4-acre lot there. Initial discussion, Mr. Smith and I talked about perhaps even doing estate residential lots, which are 3 acres. But I think there's a couple of them that can't quite be molded into that. In addition to that, if you don't mind, I'd also like to incorporate the entirety of the office's file and the video recording of the Planning Commission's hearing, including but not limited to all witness testimony, in order that this information may be part of the record, which will be available for the Board of Commissioners.
Is Mr. Smith here?
So he's had hip replacement surgery, so.
I feel for you. I need me, but, you know.
So.
Too young for that walker.
Yeah, right. Well, hopefully I get rid of it real soon.
I do too.
So hopefully this will be much less controversial.
If you want to keep your seat, if you want to sit, that's quite all right. I mean, all things considered. So, please don't, be comfortable.
Just had that done Tuesday, so.
Oh, of last week?
Yeah. You were right. But anyway, like Justin recommended, I'm in favor of larger lot sizes. We just have to be careful of the way the property lays. We might have to go down to like 2.5 acre tracts in certain spots to be able to get a building site in there. So that's why we have the different sizes. Because the larger the better, as far as I'm concerned. So yeah, the property's got ample road frontage, which is something we look for. I got David here with me, this is my dad, David Smith. And we're partners on this property, and we look for a property that's, easily split up and cost the county very little money to do it. We have good road frontage, we have improved roads here, so I really don't see any big issues unless I'm missing something.
Are you gonna build?
We haven't decided yet. We recently did a property on Big Ridge Road about 1.5 years ago, and we sold all those lots. We kind of entertained the idea of building houses on it, but there's so many variables that fall into that. It may be better just to sell the property and let the professionals deal with that.
So, I'm not familiar with that area. What type of size home would you envision being in?
The area is pretty upscale. Predominantly, you're looking at least probably 1,800 square foot houses in that area. And these lots, we priced kind of accordingly to that, so that it should kind of mimic that same situation throughout that area. But we're not planning on putting restrictions in, but that's what we foresee anyway.
Okay. Is there any other questions for Mr. Smith?
Regardless of how the lot sizes ultimately shake out, you're anticipating minimum probably 2.5, but there would be 4 off Jerusalem Church and 3 off Moore's End.
Exactly. Yep. And that's what we anticipate. I don't think we got a 2.6 is the smallest size there, and that seems to be real accurate to what's allowed in that particular spot.
Any other questions for Mr. Smith?
That's going to put that one lot close to that intersection, with the road to pull out in there. I just see problematic.
It's got ample room for negotiable. Don't really see that being an issue.
Is that lot 4?
It's a four-way stop.
And the land lays good in that area too, to allow a nice driveway access.
Yeah, there's not a curb or anything there, because I'm parameter with the property.
Right.
But I was thinking that lot was awful close to that four-way stop, which is already sort of,
Well, it's kind of nice because traffic's slow at that point too, so you don't have to worry about, an impact or something of that sort.
That's my only, that one lot is the only thing that bothers me, is because it's that intersection.
And we wouldn't have any accessing that stretch of Henderson Mountain there, because where it lays off there, it goes over the rail, it's pretty steep right there.
Any other questions? If not, we have one person that would like to speak, Ed, is it Beckett?
Yes, sir. I live on Morris Gin Road, and my only concern with this is if they're going to be bigger lots, if they want to be bigger lots, it should be estate residential, because if it gets zoned as rural residential, they can go down to 1.5. They don't develop, they sell it to somebody else, they can then put 1.5 acre tracts in there, can they not? And most of that area, I've got 21 acres, Tony's got a bunch of acres, everybody's got bigger tracts of land there. And there are no small ones, so that's my concern, it's just, it should be estate residential rather than rural, to kind of protect it from going to 1.5 acres.
So what size? What would be the minimum size you would think?
Well, what's estate, 3 acres?
I think that's what you said, 3 acres for residential, estate residential.
That's the intent of how they're wanting to do it, so that's how it should be zoned instead of rural. Kind of protects us in the future a little bit.
I might be able to add something to alleviate that too. We're only allowed to do the minor subdivision, we're only do down to 7 tracts. So we couldn't split it down below that anyway. So it shouldn't be a concern for property owners either.
It looks like, anywhere from 6.5 down to the smallest ones to do like the 2.62, 2/3 acres.
But if it gets changed to rural, can it not go 1.5 in the future with somebody? That's my concern.
Well, the way it's, I'm just, based on what I'm looking at, if he sold it, let's say you bought the whole tract and wanted to build houses on it. Most of these could not be subdivided again and be rural residential, because if it's a 2.7 acre tract of land, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, about 4. You can't subdivide that in an 2 acre and a half lots.
But they could, the ones on Moore's Gym.
Yeah, Moore's Gym, because that's 6.5, I mean, technically, I guess you could do that one there.
All right, so that's the concern, it's just that it could get subdivided further in the future. That really doesn't fit with everything else in the area.
How do we alleviate that concern?
If you so chose to recommend rural residential, you could do the condition that I suggested, which would be to condition it to the site plan, which would mean that what's on there is what's on there.
So the smallest would be 2.6 acres.
Yes, it would be effectively the same thing as they would have to rezone it to deal with. And as the chairman was saying, if you split it down further than that, it would go to SRs, and you have to have, there's additional requirements. And just so y'all know, rural residential has a minimum lot frontage of 150 feet. So some of these lots are odd shaped. If you were to split them later on, you would still have to have, you would have to meet all the other subdivision requirements later on, and they wouldn't be able to split it
for at least a year, or it would trigger a major subdivision, and they would have to go back in and put in improvements.
And if my understanding is if we do that, don't we have to come back before the board or the planning committee again and go through the steps again, or is that,
If they were to, if it was rural residential and there wasn't a zoning condition, no. If it was rural residential and there was a zoning condition, yes. Just let it occur.
So there is a condition on it, that it's, I mean, nothing's a surefire thing, but I mean, it's an obstacle to prevent that, you're concerned from happening. Or was happening, was gonna happen.
Yes, it's my understanding that, on the subdivision rules, that you cannot have access within so many feet of a intersection.
There, so I couldn't tell you exactly what it is off the top of my head. It is a good ways. I don't want to say the number that's in my head because I think it's a lot, but,
I was thinking there was one.
there is.
But I couldn't remember exactly how much.
So what would
There
happen?
is, but there has to be a site
That
distance.
one lot bothers me right there, because I go through that intersection a lot.
So it would probably have to be closer to the other lots and further away from the intersection, but that's something that we would look at before the building permit process. Our land development officer will go out there and look at the access encroachment, where to locate the driveway. And if they said, oh, we want to put the driveway here, and it doesn't have the right site distance, it's not far enough away from the intersection, we would deny it at the building, prior to the building permit stage. And we'd say, no, you have to put it somewhere else.
I go through that general area, and I go through there a good bit, and there's a lot of traffic at that intersection.
I'd be very interested to know what that distance is too, so we can probably plan.
So Brian, in my experience, a lot of people are looking for more land than less.
Well, we got this fine area where people can't afford to buy 5 and 10 acre tracts necessarily, so they can only afford what they can afford. And the builders are all telling me that right now, what is selling, you can get something in the $40,000 range. So to do that, you've got to be able to have a smaller tract to allow somebody to actually be able to build a house on and make a mortgage payment.
Just one other thing. I think they put a new subdivision out right at the intersection of Jerusalem Church and 53. And I think it was the state residential, right? From what I know.
I think I know what you're talking about, yeah, I think it is.
Which limits that to
3 acres.
Yeah, I mean, the only solution, if you do it a state residential, those, 4 lots that are along Jerusalem Church that are 2.6, put them together and only make it 2 lots. And maybe keep it all bigger than 3 acres.
That's the trick we have, is we got to keep them in the $40,000 range in order to make it the cash flow.
Is you can't, that 1 6 acre lot, you can't take off a little bit more and just move everything up, shift everything up a little
The
bit.
topography is the challenge on some of that. There's some of the places on that property that are pretty substantial.
The 6 acre lot has already been sold, correct?
Yeah, that's well, it hasn't been sold, it's closing next week, but it's selling to the neighbor.
That's assuming that this, because it's 6 acres.
Yeah, right.
Share my address and this one. So are you concerned about lot 4? Is that the one that gives you concern?
Yes. Mhm.
So that lot is roughly square. An acre is roughly 208 by 208 feet. And that's 2.65 acres. So I would assume that the frontage is a good bit more than 500 feet. 500 is the number that was in my head for the intersection, but I may be wrong.
So they would have to put it down actually almost on the border of the next lot.
Yeah. And they could do that. It would just have to be 15 feet from the property line.
And we're happy to tweak the lines as needed for that sort of thing.
But That's the number that's bouncing around in my head. It may be totally wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's what it is.
That was a concern, because that is a major intersection for that area out there. There's a lot of building going on in that area now, so.
Any other questions or comments?
And you need to slow down the speed limit when you go through.
Right.
Is that what you want?
That stop sign's better than speed bump. That stop sign's better than speed bump there.
There's somebody that likes to do donuts.
Oh,
Oh, I know, they do.
It's a young guy with an ATV and he loves doing it. I own just down from where all this is talking on Henderson Mountain.
People doing donuts out there. It's a big intersection, it's big enough to do
It
donuts.
is. I'm a little surprised about all of this idea of developing this out there, but
it's a nice area.
we ran away from the city for a
Any
reason.
other questions? Or
They're
comments?
just chasing us every day, isn't it?
I would recommend that the application be approved with the recommendations about the minimum lot sizes and that you make there, and that they do, that one others do 7 to be provided on there. And did you put the road on Claudia down before everybody stopped?
We have a motion and second to approve the county's recommendation with the staff recommendation for the rezone request. Any discussion?
Subject to the exhibit put forward as being the minimum lot size.
Any discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Motion carried unanimously. That closes that hearing. That takes us to the next item, which is board comments. Are there any board comments?
I got one question.
Yes.
If the county does not approve it, why do we have to vote on it? So you just said the county denied that application.
To allow a public hearing so people can have a voice.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. I'll let Justin might be able to add some more light on that.
It's really, that's their decision, but if we approve it, then the board of commissioners got to either say yea or nay.
We just recommend.
That's the main.
So it's actually part of a state requirement. You have to have a public hearing. People will have to be able to speak. That 10-minute requirement is actually written into the state law. It's called the zoning procedures law. And there has to be a public hearing where people can voice their opinions and bring it before a recommending body, which ours is set up to have a recommending body. And then it goes to the board of commissioners for a final decision.
Who makes the decision?
Stuff the
on
state
what-
makes us do.
If they ever want to change it from an acre and a half, who makes the decision on that? Let's say that's 5 acres.
Depends on which one you're talking about. Are you talking about the say the property owner wants to go?
No, I'm talking about the county. Say the county decided we're going to go from an acre and a half to 5 acres.
So that would be I think that it's written, and Phil, please correct me if I'm wrong, I believe y'all have to bring that recommendation. I would have to do the research and bring it back before y'all, and y'all would recommend a text amendment to the Board of Commissioners to the zoning code. And that's how we would change that. But y'all can tell me, Justin, I want you to do the research on this because we want to change the zoning code to this because we think it's a good idea. I would then look into that, write the model, have Phil approve it, put it before y'all. Y'all make a recommendation. They go to the Board of Commissioners and they would approve or deny it.
Appreciate that.
Yes, sir.
Any other board comments? If not, are there any public comments?
I just
Yes,
got a
ma'am.
clarifying question. So
Yes.
what we're saying is they can't make this smaller than the sub sizes they're talking about now. Is that right?
Correct. That's,
If the board of commissioners approves it.
once the board commissioners
Right.
approve, again, we're just.
I understand that. I just want to make sure I understand because we've only been on our property 9 months, so this is a lot of change.
These proposed 7 lots is, that's all there is.
Okay.
Any other public comments? If not, then I hear a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Meeting is adjourned. Thank you.